Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to Recipe Redemption. Today's video is going to be a little different. I'm not cooking anything. I'm not even drinking anything. I'm just going to be talking about an experience that we had at a local whiskey bar. This is a continuation of the Potent Potables series. So I'm just going to be talking for a little while, and if that's not your thing, I get it. Please feel free to click on some of the other videos that I have up. I've been doing this channel for several years, so there's a decent probability there's something that'll interest you there. But for those of you who are still with me, for Chris's birthday, because we're on this sort of whiskey discovery journey together, I took her to a local whiskey bar, and we tried a couple of flights of different whiskeys. And this particular establishment has in excess of about 950 different bottles of whiskey, various styles, various ages, from all around the world. And so it is one good way, well, really the good way, to taste a selection of whiskeys all at once without completely breaking the bank. Now, full disclosure, it's still a good bit of money, but we're tasting older stuff, rarer, or at least more difficult to acquire whiskeys, and so the price is going to be commensurately high. And to their credit, they had an on-site whiskey sommelier who was able to kind of guide us through the process. So we started off the evening with two bourbons. We tend to, so far anyway, prefer bourbons. That sweeter corn characteristic that you get from bourbons and majority corn whiskeys suits our palate for the moment, at least. Maybe over time we'll acquire a taste for smokier scotches or more complex stuff. Not saying that bourbons can't be complex, but so far we've been pretty much sticking to more mass market bourbons. So we started off with a couple bourbons, and then the sommelier kind of asked us some questions about what kinds of things do we like, what kind of experience are we looking to have, and what kind of price point we're looking at. And so we kept it to about $100 per flight. And as it turned out, he gave us a couple that were a little bit under $100 per flight. So all told, I think our alcohol bill for the evening came out to just over 200, like 200 and where'd it go? Actually 195 for alcohol. So for what turned out to be 8.5 ounces of alcohol, or 8.5, 9 drinks, we spent about $200 or about $23 per drink, which is kind of high for, $23 for each ounce on average of whiskey. But, again, you're tasting some expensive whiskeys, and you're looking at easily, $1,500 if you were to actually go out and buy all of these bottles for yourself in order to try them. And there's a high likelihood, actually 100% likelihood in this case, that you would end up with some bottles of stuff that you absolutely hate. So if you just want to taste, you pay for the convenience, but also you're not breaking the bank. And then if you find that one bottle that's like, oh, this is life-changing, I love this stuff, then you can go and spend your money on that bottle. You're going to love it, and you'll get lots and lots of pleasure out of it. So what we ended up having was, the first flight was what he called an around the world flight. And it was a sampling of the major styles of whiskey. So, had a bourbon, had a Japanese whiskey, had a Scotch, had an Irish. to kind of give him an idea of what we like and what we don't. Then the next flight kind of narrowed it down a little bit. We decided that we, still lean toward bourbons. So he gave us a couple bourbons, and just to kind of challenge us a little bit, gave us a Japanese whiskey that is a little bit more in the Scotch direction than the other, the Toki that I had, the Suntory Toki that I had tried in a previous video. This was a Hibiki, as it turns out, and it is a little more Scotch style. It is actually smoky. It was actually malted with peat in the Scotch style, so it was in that direction, just to see, okay, if you didn't like this, the Scotch, how about this Japanese Scotch style whiskey, which is a little lighter on the smoke? How do you like that? So let's go through all of them. Before dinner, or kind of as our first sampling, I had the Eagle Rare single barrel bourbon. This retails, oh, by the way, this list is to the best of my recollection. I took some notes, but yeah, I'm not very organized, especially after a drink or three. This is as close to my recollection of the list as possible. The prices that I give, since I didn't actually think to get the itemized receipt and keep the itemized receipt for all the whiskeys I had, so I don't know how much I paid for each one of them. Obviously, they're going to vary depending on the price for the bottle. So, as sort of a cheap substitute, if you will, I looked them up online and said, okay, what are these retailing for? These are just the prices that I managed to find for these individual bottles online. These are not indicative of the prices that you will find. Supply and demand means that depending on where you are, your local liquor store will have greater or lesser difficulty in acquiring each of these bottles if they bother to, and the prices, and then depending on popularity, the prices will be commensurately adjusted based on how much demand and how much supply there are. So these prices are not going to be indicative of the ones that you will find in your area, but they give you a general idea, a ballpark area of what to expect, mostly. So, that being said, Eagle Rare single barrel bourbon, I found it for $55 a bottle. It is a bourbon, and I think it was actually my favorite for the evening, oddly enough. Yeah, it was quite lovely. Maple syrup is what I got out of it. And I think what people call cherry in a lot of bourbons in particular, I actually, on the nose, I get red vines. Which is like, people kind of cock their head at me. I'm like, it smells like red vines. What can I say? But that's what I got on the nose. Subtle sweetness, clean finish. Loved it a lot. I think it's arguably worth the $55 a bottle. I think I enjoy some of the other ones, like Monkey Shoulder, that I've tried, and the Basil Hayden's for a slightly lower price point. And I'm looking for Old Granddad. I'm really want to taste that to see if it is comparable to the Basil Hayden's, and if it is indeed as cheap as everyone says. But for the moment, at least, the Eagle Rare was quite good. Chris actually got the Henry McKenna bourbon, and I found this for $15.49 a bottle. So, bargain. And it was pretty good. Spicier than the Eagle Rare. So I suspect there's more rye in the mash bill than the Eagle Rare. I think I got some citrus on the nose. But at the same time, the flavor seemed less pronounced to me. It wasn't as tasty, I guess, as the Eagle Rare to me. But it was okay. Now, on to the first flight. Again, this is around the world. starting with the Hibiki Japanese whiskey. And actually, I was wrong about the Scotch style. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Hibiki, I think Harmony is what they call it, Japanese whiskey. This retails at around $95 a bottle. And since I didn't have the Toki with me, obviously sitting next to it to compare it to, I'm not sure what differences there are between the two. Remember, I mentioned in the previous whiskey video, Hibiki and Toki are blended from two single malts and a single grain from the same three distilleries. And so one would suspect they would taste really, really close to each other, but they're in different proportions of those three whiskeys. So some people theoretically can taste the difference, and that, you know, they are two different sub brands of Suntory. What's the difference? I don't know until I can taste them side by side. I couldn't tell just tasting the Hibiki. It tasted like the Toki, from what I remembered the Toki tasting like. Very similar. I picked up some aromas, but they're so subtle that I couldn't tell you what they were apart from the alcohol itself. Chris said that she picked up honey, a little bit of honey, some citrus, and it was light, but it was sharp and bitter. So I trust the super taster more than my own. But in any case, moving on. Next up is the 9-year-old Gold Spot Irish whiskey. I found this for $129.99 per bottle. And I have to admit, I remember nothing about this whiskey. Of the four from this flight, it left the least impression on me. And I sort of remember stating that I didn't actually taste anything other than the alcohol and some just vaguely, whiskey-ish, woody-ish flavors. It's 51.4% alcohol by volume. That might have affected things. I remember Chris saying that it tasted too hot, and that it seemed to get in the way of the rest of the flavors. And I had to agree with her that higher ABV, even just, whatever, 11.4% was enough. Chris said that she did pick up some toasty notes, some caramel, but not a whole lot else. And again, I trust the super taster. I didn't even pick up that much. Was not impressed. But again, this is my palate we're talking about. I may be talking out my ass. I don't know. But that's what I got. And then the bourbon comes along. The Colonel Taylor Single Barrel. Retails for $190 a bottle. And it just pushes me more in the direction of believing that I'm a bourbon guy for now. Again, brown sugar, little cherry, subtle vanilla. Very nice. Chris thought it was that all the whiskeys that we tried were a little bitter for her, and I didn't necessarily get that on all of them, but she said that they were all a little bitter, including this one. Again, caramel toasty notes. It wasn't bad, but wasn't as good as the Henry McKenna, that she had at the beginning of the evening. And finally, of the round the world, we cannot forget the Scotch. We had Talisker Distiller's Edition Single Malt Scotch. 2021 edition retails for $119.99 a bottle. I think I'm not a Scotch guy yet. Smokiness, it was very prominent, and I think because we said we were kind of noobs, I think the sommelier selected a lighter entry-level Scotch for us, and it was still too much. Because there was a subtle sweetness on the nose, it combined with the smokiness to give me kind of a pit barbecue sort of feeling. And it carries through to the flavor with that sort of distinct iodine flavor that comes with a lot of scotches. And as the sweetness sort of dissipates, as after you swallow and the sweetness sort of fades away, the smokiness remains. So it sort of transitions from pit barbecue to ashtray really quickly. Not my bag, baby. Chris tasted the iodine and the sort of the brininess of it, and immediately said it smelled and tasted like Band-Aids, Naugahyde, and linoleum, and was not a fan. She says it is undrinkable. Pretty strong opinion there, but I get it. It was not to my taste. So we told all this to sommelier. He said, okay, let me see what I can do. Brought back 2 bourbons and a Japanese whiskey for us to try in the second flight. First go is the Akashi. Sorry, I said it was Hibiki. The Akashi was in the second flight. Single malt, sherry cask, Japanese whiskey, retails for $299.99 per bottle. This was more in the Scotch style. This was actually malted over peat. Smoky, definitely smokier than the Hibiki, which didn't have any smoke at all, but noticeably less smoky than the actual Scotch, the Taliskers, but still pretty smoky. Still kind of iodine-y, still kind of briny. So it's very much in the Scotch style. Again, not our favorite. Again, Chris said it tasted like Band-Aids. Not my favorite. I'm willing to try other scotches, but I'm wary now. I so far do not like the smokiness. I happened to mention, just because they have 950 bottles, I asked them, just for shits and giggles, how much is the Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old? Pappy is a weird brand because most of their bottles, their actual suggested retail price ranges from 50 to 150 per bottle, depending on the type or edition. But on the secondary market, because Pappy has this cachet of this is the whiskey for true whiskey snobs, they mark it up by thousands of dollars. So the Pappy Van Winkle 23 manufacturer's suggested retail price is, I think, $120 per bottle, something like that. But if you actually look at what distributors are selling it for, it runs around $7,000 to $8,000 a bottle. So I said, how much is it really? And because this guy can actually get it wholesale, he's the sommelier and this particular whiskey bar, they are passing the savings on to you. So they're getting more, on the order of $50 a bottle for some of these. He does have some Pappy and some of the old Grandad, basically, it was 20-year-old Scotch when it was released in the 70s. So it's 70-year-old Scotch now. And that, he says, he has to charge about $4,000 per 1 ounce drink for that. Obviously, not dropping that much. We said, please keep this flight to $100. And he actually managed to slip us a Van Winkle Special Reserve 12-year bourbon. And I found it wholesale for $49 a bottle, or retail for $1,100 a bottle. So depending on who you ask, this was either $1.96 an ounce or $44 an ounce. You choose. But he slipped that into our second flight for us to try. It's a bourbon, so it's, to our taste, but it's better than the Scotches and some of the Japanese as well. But it was a lot more subtle to me. For such a renowned brand, they were very, to me, kind of muted flavors and aromas. And I had to discount for the fact that this is the most affordable bottle that they pour from. So that maybe comes with a commensurate reduction in everything else. Um, Not our favorite, not bad, not as bitter as the others, but also not as anything else as any of the others. Okay, hint of maple syrup. I didn't really pick up a whole lot else. There was just this sort of fleeting sensation of like orange peel, like if you freshly peel an orange and you get that expression of orange oil into the air. There was just that little hint of it, and but you're just not sure if it was really there or if it's just in the air around you from all the other whiskeys people are drinking or whatever. I don't know. Final whiskey of the evening was the Michter's single barrel. He's still trying us on, sort of more complex bourbons, I guess. This was a 10-year-old bourbon. It retails for about $368 a bottle. Not bad. Our favorite for this flight, but still not as good as the other bourbons that we had earlier. Caramel, light spice like cinnamon, some vanilla. Again, Chris thought it was still kind of bitter, roasty flavors, slight citrus. Not bad. So, this is kind of expensive. Like I said, about $200 worth of alcohol for what ended up being 8.5 ounces. The Van Winkle, because it is still kind of expensive, he gave us a half pour to kind of keep our flight under $100. So, 8.5 ounces of whiskeys that we tried that evening. And it came out to just under $200. So, bit of money. But if you want to sample a decent number of whiskeys, this is kind of the only way to go and not break the bank and not end up with bottles of whiskeys that you hate. You get to try it and say, bleh, never having that again. And you've only had 1 ounce of it, paid for 1 ounce of it. So, on average, $23. Obviously, these are first world problems. Not everyone can afford to do this kind of tasting, but I decided to splurge because it was her birthday. But this is one way to go. Another way to go is to look at all the reviews and try the highest reviewed ones. But again, you're still buying a whole bottle of something that you don't know if you're going to like, and the reviewers can only come so close to your sense of taste. So again, you might still end up with a bottle that you hate. If you have the opportunity to get together with like-minded individuals who have bought a bottle of something that you've never tried before, you can try and mooch a drink off of them. And take your friend's recommendations, and they say, hey, I know you're exploring whiskey, try some of this, and graciously accept the offer of a new whiskey, try it out for yourself, see if you like it, and if you do, then you can buy a bottle of it and be reasonably assured that you will enjoy it from top to bottom. So that's part of the experience, and just you invest what you can to it over time. So